There is a pattern that plays out in countless relationships, a pattern that most women engage in without ever calling it what it actually is. They test the man they are with. It happens quietly, subtly, often in ways that neither partner fully recognizes until the damage has already been done. Testing does not usually look dramatic. It does not announce itself with fanfare or confrontation. Instead, it looks like small, manufactured moments, carefully designed to answer a question she has not said out loud. Will he notice if I pull back a little? Will he chase if I go cold? Will he still show up if I make this harder than it needs to be? Will he prove he cares by pushing through something I put in his way on purpose? These questions circulate beneath the surface of the interaction, driving behavior that is often unconscious but nonetheless intentional. And the tragedy is that most women who do this are not doing it to be cruel. They are not trying to hurt the man they are with. Often, it comes from somewhere entirely reasonable, an old wound, a past relationship where someone did not show up, a deep-seated fear that good things do not last unless they are constantly checked for cracks. Testing feels from the inside like protecting herself, like due diligence, like making sure before she trusts completely. It feels responsible. It feels cautious. It feels like the smart thing to do. But here is what she rarely considers, and this is what needs to be walked through honestly today. A good man is not the man who needs to be tested the most carefully. He is the man who needs it the least. And testing him anyway does not reveal his character. It slowly erodes something that was already there, something that was precious and fragile and worth protecting. Think about what a genuinely good man actually is. He is present. He is consistent. He does not require games to stay engaged because he was never planning to leave in the first place. He shows up on ordinary Tuesdays the same way he shows up on anniversaries. Not because he is trying to pass an evaluation, but because showing up is simply who he is. It is his nature. It is his character. It is the way he moves through the world. He does not need to be reminded to be present. He does not need to be tested to prove his commitment. His commitment is evident in the 1,000 small ways he shows up every single day. The philosopher Epictetus once observed that we should not seek to have events happen as we wish, but to wish them to happen as they do happen. A good man accepts the reality of the relationship as it is. He does not try to manipulate it or control it. He simply shows up and does his best. Now place a man like that inside a pattern of being tested. The manufactured coldness he has to push through, the manufactured distance he has to close, the small crisis that appears out of nowhere on a night that had been calm an hour earlier. He does not know it is a test. He only experiences it as instability, as a relationship where the ground occasionally and unpredictably shifts beneath him for reasons he cannot identify. The first few times he responds well. He reaches for her. He asks what is wrong. He tries to close the distance because closing distance is what a good man does. And if he passes, if he proves himself, the relationship goes back to feeling stable, at least for a while until the next test arrives. The philosopher Seneca warned that the greatest obstacle to living is expectancy, which hangs upon tomorrow and loses today. A man who is constantly tested is living in a state of expectancy, waiting for the next test, waiting for the next manufactured crisis, never fully able to relax into the relationship because he never knows when the ground will shift again. Here is what accumulates underneath that pattern that she does not see. Every test he passes teaches him nothing except that another test is likely coming. It does not build his trust in the relationship. It builds his vigilance. It trains him to be watchful, to be careful, to be guarded. He starts to notice a specific kind of unpredictability that has nothing to do with anything he did and everything to do with something he cannot name or address, because the actual concern driving it was never spoken out loud to him at all. He is left to interpret the shifting moods, the sudden coldness, the unexpected distance, without any real understanding of what is causing it. And because he cannot name it, because he does not know it is a test, he begins to internalize the pattern as something wrong with him. He starts to wonder if he is not doing enough, if he is not being attentive enough, if he is somehow failing in ways he cannot see. The philosopher Marcus Aurelius wrote that the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. And when a good man is placed in a relationship where he is constantly being tested, his thoughts become dyed with doubt. He begins to question himself. He begins to question his own worth. He begins to wonder if he is truly good enough. A good man can pass a lot of tests. He can push through the manufactured distance. He can close the gap she creates. He can reassure her when she pulls away. He can show up again and again, even when it feels like he is the only one doing the work. But what he eventually cannot do is keep proving himself to someone who requires proof on a recurring basis with no expiration date. Because there is no version of passing that ends the requirement. There is only the next test and the one after that. And a man watching that pattern eventually reaches an honest and painful conclusion. Nothing he does is going to produce lasting certainty here, because the uncertainty was never actually about him. It was about something in her that testing him was never going to resolve. The philosopher Boethius, writing from his prison cell, observed that the nature of happiness is such that it cannot be lost if it is truly possessed. But when a relationship is built on a foundation of tests, happiness is never truly possessed. It is always conditional, always contingent on passing the next evaluation. And that is no way to live. This is the part that costs her the most if she does not see it in time. The good man does not usually leave in anger. He does not usually leave loudly. He does not storm out with accusations or dramatic declarations. He leaves the way good men often leave, quietly, gradually, the effort declining a little at a time, as he learns the effort here is never quite enough to produce lasting peace. By the time she notices he has stopped chasing, stopped reassuring, stopped closing the distance the way he used to, she often reads it as him failing the test. She tells herself he was not strong enough, not committed enough, not willing to fight for her. But what actually happened is that he simply ran out of ways to prove something that was never provable to begin with. He exhausted himself trying to meet a standard that kept shifting, kept moving, kept demanding more. The philosopher Albert Camus wrote about the myth of Sisyphus, the man condemned to push a boulder up a hill only to watch it roll back down, repeating the task for eternity. A man who is constantly tested is living a similar fate. He pushes the boulder of reassurance up the hill, only to have it roll back down when the next test arrives. And eventually, even the strongest man grows tired of the endless cycle. It deserves to be said honestly that testing usually comes from somewhere real. A past betrayal, a parent who was inconsistent, an old relationship where trust was violated and never adequately repaired. The impulse to check whether this one is different is not an irrational impulse. It comes from a real place, and it deserves to be treated with compassion rather than judgment. But compassion for where the behavior comes from does not change what the behavior does to the relationship in front of her right now. A good man is not made more trustworthy by being tested repeatedly. He is made tired by it. The philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche observed that love is not a feeling of happiness. Love is a willingness to sacrifice. But sacrifice becomes meaningless when it is demanded rather than offered freely. A man who is constantly tested feels that his sacrifices are never enough, that his efforts are never truly appreciated, that his love is never fully accepted. He gives and gives and gives, but the test never stops, and eventually he stops giving. A woman who wants to keep a good man does not need to test him less because he has not earned trust. She needs to test him less because trust that requires constant re-verification is not actually trust. It is surveillance wearing trust's name. It is a shadow that masquerades as connection. And no relationship, however good the man inside it, survives being surveilled indefinitely. The philosopher Hannah Arendt wrote about the banality of evil, the way ordinary people can commit terrible acts simply by following routines and refusing to question them. Testing is not evil, but it can become banal. It can become routine. It can become a habit that she follows without ever questioning whether it serves her or the relationship. And when testing becomes routine, it ceases to be a tool for building trust and becomes a weapon of slow destruction. If a woman recognizes this pattern in herself, the work is not learning to test more cleverly, so he cannot tell. It is not learning to be subtler in her tests or better at disguising them. The work is going back to the original wound that made trusting someone feel unsafe in the first place, and healing that directly rather than routing it through a man who did nothing to deserve being its proving ground. The good men who stay are not staying because they passed every test perfectly. They are staying with women who eventually learn to let trust be given rather than extracted one manufactured crisis at a time. The philosopher Carl Jung observed that the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. And for a woman who tests constantly, accepting herself completely means accepting that her fear of betrayal is her own to heal. It means accepting that no man can prove himself enough to fill a void that was created by someone else. It means accepting that her tests are not protecting her. They are keeping her from experiencing the very intimacy she claims to want. The philosopher Rumi wrote that the wound is the place where the light enters you. But for a woman who tests constantly, the wound has become a wall. It has become a fortress that she uses to keep people out, even as she claims to be inviting them in. There is another layer to this that deserves attention. The testing pattern does not only affect the man being tested, it also affects the woman doing the testing. It keeps her in a state of hypervigilance, always scanning for signs of betrayal, always looking for cracks in the foundation. This is exhausting. It is mentally and emotionally draining. It prevents her from ever fully relaxing into the relationship because she is always on guard. The philosopher Alain de Botton wrote that we are all in search of love, but we are also in search of a love that feels familiar, and sometimes the familiar love is the one that hurts us. For a woman who has been hurt before, the familiar love might be the one that keeps her on edge. The familiar love might be the one that requires constant vigilance. And so she recreates the conditions of her past wounds, not because she wants to be hurt, but because it is what she knows. It is what feels normal. It is what feels safe, even though it is not safety at all. It is just familiarity disguised as safety. The good man who stays is often the one who sees through the tests. He recognizes that the manufactured distance is not really distance, it is fear. He recognizes that the sudden coldness is not really coldness, it is self-protection. He recognizes that the small crises are not really about the small thing they appear to be about. They are about something larger, something older, something that has nothing to do with him. And because he is a good man, he responds with patience. He responds with compassion. He responds with love. But even the most patient man has limits. Even the most compassionate man can grow tired. Even the most loving man can reach a point where he realizes that his love is not enough to heal a wound that she is not willing to look at directly. The philosopher Leo Tolstoy wrote that love is life. And if you miss love, you miss life. But when a man is constantly tested, he is not experiencing love. He is experiencing a performance of love. He is being asked to prove his love rather than simply live it. And the difference between proving love and living love is the difference between a flower that is pressed in a book and a flower that grows in the sun. One is preserved, but it is dead. The other is alive, but it requires care and trust. If you are a man who has felt tested in a relationship, you know the exhaustion that comes with it. You know the feeling of being asked to prove yourself again and again, even though you have already proven yourself 100 times. You know the feeling of being held to a standard that keeps shifting, a standard that you can never quite meet, a standard that was never really about you in the first place. The philosopher Ayn Rand wrote that the question is not who will let me, but who will stop me. And for a man who is being tested, the question becomes not how can I prove myself, but how long can I keep proving myself before I realize that the proof will never be enough. The answer, unfortunately, is often too long. Men stay too long in relationships where they are constantly tested because they are good men. They stay because they want to be the one who is different, the one who breaks the pattern, the one who finally shows her that she can trust. But here is the truth that every good man eventually learns. He cannot fix what he did not break. He cannot heal what he did not wound. He can only show up, be present, and do his best. And if that is not enough, if the tests keep coming, if the proof is never enough, then he must accept that the problem is not him. The problem is the test itself. To the women watching, this is not meant to be a condemnation. It is meant to be a mirror. Look at your relationship honestly. If you are testing him, what are you actually trying to find out? And has testing ever once given you a real answer? The philosopher Socrates said that the unexamined life is not worth living, and the unexamined relationship is not worth having. Examine your tests. Ask yourself where they come from. Ask yourself what they are really about, and ask yourself whether they are protecting you or keeping you from the love you actually want. Because the love you actually want does not require constant proof. The love you actually want is the kind that allows you to relax, to trust, to be yourself. And that kind of love cannot exist in a relationship where one person is constantly testing the other. It can only exist in a relationship where both people have done the work to heal their wounds and are willing to give trust freely without demanding proof. The philosopher Martin Buber wrote about the difference between I-it relationships and I-thou relationships. In an I-it relationship, we treat the other person as an object, as a thing to be used or evaluated. In an I-thou relationship, we treat the other person as a subject, as a whole person worthy of our presence and our trust. Testing is an I-it dynamic. It treats the man as an object to be evaluated, as a thing to be tested, rather than as a person to be trusted. And as long as the relationship remains in the I-it dynamic, it cannot grow into the I-thou connection that both people are truly seeking. The philosopher Simone de Beauvoir wrote that one is not born a woman, but becomes one. And in the same way, trust is not something we are born with. It is something we must choose to build, day by day, moment by moment. And choosing to trust means choosing to stop testing. It means choosing to believe that the man in front of you is not the man who hurt you before. It means choosing to give him the benefit of the doubt rather than assuming he will fail. It means choosing to let love be love rather than a test. There is a reason testing feels so common in relationships. It is a defense mechanism, a way of protecting the heart from potential pain. But defense mechanisms, while they may keep us safe in the short term, often prevent us from experiencing the fullness of connection in the long term. The philosopher Viktor Frankl wrote that between stimulus and response there is a space, and in that space is our power to choose our response. For a woman who is tempted to test, that space is where she can pause and ask herself whether the test is really necessary. She can choose to respond differently. She can choose to speak her fear rather than act it out. She can choose to say, "I am afraid of being hurt," rather than manufacturing a crisis to see if he will show up. That choice is the difference between connection and control. One builds intimacy, the other undermines it. The philosopher Humberto Maturana wrote that love is the domain of those behaviors through which another person arises as a legitimate other in coexistence with us. When a woman tests a man, she is not treating him as a legitimate other. She is treating him as a potential threat. And as long as he is seen as a threat, he cannot be truly loved. In the end, the good man who is constantly tested will eventually stop. He will stop chasing. He will stop reassuring. He will stop trying to close the distance. And when he stops, she will finally get the answer she was looking for. He failed the test. But what she will not see is that he did not fail because he was not good enough. He failed because he was tired. He failed because he realized that the test was never about him. He failed because he understood, finally, that proving himself to someone who does not trust him is a task without end. And he chose, after all of his effort, to stop trying to prove something that should have been believed without proof. The philosopher Albert Schweitzer wrote that the greatest thing is to love and be loved in return. But when one person is constantly testing, love becomes a transaction, a negotiation, a series of hoops to jump through. And the man who jumps through enough hoops eventually realizes that he is not a man, he is a performer. He is not in a relationship, he is in an audition, and he walks away, not because he does not care, but because he deserves to be loved without auditioning for it every single day. If this video spoke to you, drop a like. Share it with someone who needs to hear this, and hit that subscribe button for more deep breakdowns on human behavior and relationships. And if this video helped you in one way or another, please consider supporting the channel using the Super Thanks feature. Your support means a lot, and it helps us keep creating better content specially for you. Every contribution goes directly into improving the quality of these videos and bringing you more of the Stoic wisdom and psychological insights that you have come to expect. Until next time, stay grounded, stay present, and remember, trust is not something that can be demanded. It can only be given.